What would happen if the founder of a famous restaurant returned as an ordinary customer and discovered that the very place he built was now exploiting the very people who once believed in his dream? The soft yellow light filtered through the large windows of Redstone Hearth like a gentle invitation in the late evening. No one paid much attention to the man stepping out of a silver rental car parked at an angle in the lot. A man in his early 40s, modestly dressed in a faded flannel shirt, a low-slung baseball cap, and a quiet, steady stride. But behind that unassuming appearance was Adrian Cole, the founder and CEO of one of the Midwest's most renowned steakhouse chains. Redstone Hearth had started as a dream he built from the back of a rusted truck on the edge of Kansas City, serving oak wood-grilled steak with a genuine smile and a firm handshake. But now, 15 years and 39 locations later, Adrian had returned in silence. Not to celebrate, but to investigate. A string of internal alerts from the Springfield branch, unusually high turnover, 3 managers resigning within 10 months, plummeting customer reviews, had made it impossible for him to stay seated in a boardroom. The heavy wooden door opened, and the aroma of grilled beef mixed with the rich scent of browned butter filled the air, bringing with it a strange sense of nostalgia. Everything appeared the same. The warm amber lighting, the faux brick walls, the cozy fireplace at the back, and the soft brown leather booths. But Adrian wasn't searching for sentimentality. He was looking for details: a flickering ceiling bulb, an overflowing trash bin by the entrance, and the smile of the young hostess, stiff, weary, like it had been rehearsed from a PowerPoint slide. "Welcome to Redstone Hearth," she said flatly. "Table for one?" Adrian nodded, deliberately lifting his voice with a touch of friendly warmth, the kind business travelers often used. "Yes, if you have a quiet corner, I'd appreciate that." She led him to a secluded table with a clear view of the dining room. Adrian quietly observed as she walked away. Several tables remained uncleared, baskets of cold bread untouched, napkins scattered. Behind the bar, a bartender wiped the same glass over and over, gaze distant, as if avoiding someone's eyes. Another server rushed by, not with the confident air of someone in control, but more like someone fleeing an invisible pressure. The room wasn't loud, but something felt off. Balance. Adrian had always believed a good restaurant needed more than great food. It needed rhythm, like a rehearsed play. Tonight, those rhythms were out of sync. It wasn't until more than 7 minutes later that a server finally arrived. She appeared to be in her early 30s, hair neatly tied back, apron crisp. The name tag on her chest read Lena. She smiled. Not too bright, but undeniably present. "Good evening, I'm Lena. I'll be taking care of you tonight. Would you like to start with some water and a glass of our house red wine?" Adrian nodded. "Sure, as long as it's not too awful," he replied with a hint of humor. She smiled again, this time more genuinely. "Lately the wine's better than the steak," she whispered, almost like a joke, but not quite. Adrian raised an eyebrow. She didn't affirm or deny, just spoke with the kind of honesty people use when they're too tired to pretend. As Lena walked away, Adrian kept watching. A family of 4 exited, the father muttering something about slow service. A worker sweeping near the kitchen kept glancing nervously toward a manager sitting at the far end of the bar. But the moment that would forever stay with Adrian came just as Lena returned, placing a dessert plate on his table. She leaned in slightly, tilting her head as if adjusting a napkin, and whispered so only he could hear, "If you're thinking of applying here, don't. This place is a trap. This is a..." The moment those words touched his ears, he froze, not from shock, but because the sinking feeling he'd carried for weeks had just been confirmed in 7 whispered words. Adrian remained seated, fork idle in his hand, eyes tracking every movement in the space he once considered the very symbol of care and excellence. When he was still a drifting chef, he used to believe that every detail in a restaurant, from the ceiling lights to the timing of a water refill, was a sign of whether its heart was still beating or clinically dead. And at this very moment, Redstone Hearth's heart was fading. Lena returned with the wine and a look that seemed like she wanted to say something but stopped herself. "This wine is better than I'd care to admit," she said softly, placing the glass down. her hand lingering on the menu just a second too long before pulling back. Adrian nodded without asking further. Everything he needed was revealing itself without being prompted. Nearby, a little boy reached for a piece of bread from the basket, only to find it empty. He looked up at his mother, who smiled gently, though clearly exhausted. Adrian was about to raise his hand to call a server on their behalf when something unexpected happened. An elderly woman at the next table suddenly gasped for air, clutching her chest, her head slumping forward onto the table. The entire room froze. Lena rushed over and knelt beside the woman while some diners shot up from their seats. But what caught Adrian's attention wasn't Lena. It was the manager standing behind the bar, arms folded, eyes cold, watching like it was a scene from a movie that had nothing to do with him. No one called for help. No staff rushed over. Adrian, no longer pretending to be a stranger, stood up and dialed 911. Only then did the manager, his name tag read Raymond, step forward, his expression calm to the point of detachment. "Everyone, please clear a path for emergency services," he said flatly. "It's fine. She does this all the time." The apathy in that sentence made Adrian's brow tighten. It wasn't just the sudden event. It was the mechanical coldness. He was beginning to understand. The system wasn't broken. It had been reprogrammed, and in this version, compassion had no place. After the woman was taken away, Lena returned to Adrian's table, her hands still trembling. "Thank you for calling," she whispered, unable to meet his eyes. "Not everyone would have done that here." Adrian set down his wine. "I get the sense you have more to say," he replied gently, almost as a test. Lena bit her lip, her eyes darting toward the bar where Raymond was scribbling something into a black notebook, then answered in a breath that barely registered his speech. "My break starts at 8:15. If you're still here, out back." As Lena turned away, Adrian watched her disappear through the kitchen doors. On his way back to his seat, he caught sight of a crookedly taped notice on the wall. "Now hiring, competitive pay." A cheap slogan for a sophisticated trap. And he knew then, if he didn't intervene, more people like Lena would get pulled into this vicious cycle where loyalty was exploited and silence was rewarded through fear. 8:13 p.m. Adrian remained seated for a few more minutes after paying the bill, slowly sipping the last of his water to stretch the time. He didn't turn his head too quickly or show anything out of the ordinary. He couldn't afford to let Raymond or anyone else at the restaurant suspect that he was more than just another customer. He got up, put on his coat, and walked toward the door like everyone else. Except instead of heading to the parking lot, he turned down the narrow alley behind the restaurant. The air in the back was cold and damp, lit just enough by the warehouse's flickering neon light to reveal a row of industrial trash bins and scattered oil stains on the ground. The back door creaked open just as the clock ticked to 8:16. Lena stepped out, clutching a sandwich and a cheap bottle of iced tea. She flinched when she saw him standing there, but her eyes didn't show panic, just caution. The kind of survival instinct you develop after months working in a place where one wrong sentence could cost you your entire week's schedule. "I've got 10 minutes, and if they see me, I could lose my job," she said flatly, wasting no time. Adrian nodded. "I'm not recording, I'm not taking notes. I just want to understand what's happening here." Lena sat down on a rusty metal chair, eating as she spoke, as if she needed the energy to dig into a system that had worn her thin. She described how the branch managers forced employees to sign for less than 30 hours a week to dodge health coverage, but still made them work 35, sometimes even 40 hours. If anyone objected, their hours were cut in half without explanation. "You want to know why we don't just quit?" Lena gave a soft, joyless laugh. "Because most of us have kids to raise, student loans to pay, or aging parents to support. They don't bind us with contracts here. They bind us with fear that we've got nowhere else to go." Adrian asked about tips, the last lifeline for most restaurant staff. Lena shook her head and set her sandwich down. "They collect everything into this thing called a fair share fund. It gets distributed monthly, but no one knows who manages it or how it's calculated. Every month there's some deduction, broken glass fees, performance penalties, maintenance charges. Some months I get just $80 back, even when I know customers tipped me close to $400. Adrian felt a chill crawl down his spine, not from the wind, but from the realization that what he heard wasn't just carelessness. It was a system meticulously designed to deceive. This wasn't accidental. It It was engineered extraction. Lena exhaled, locking eyes with him for the first time since stepping outside. You could be a reporter, a lawyer, or some guy prepping a lawsuit, but if you really want to understand, just know this. Here, they don't break you loudly. They wear you down, day by day, hour by hour, until you stop noticing anything's wrong. She stood, brushing crumbs from her apron. I have to go back. Thanks for listening, but you should be careful too. Guys like you, this place chews them up. She walked away without looking back. And Adrian, standing alone in the mix of garbage fumes, kitchen smoke, and darkness, realized one thing with absolute clarity. If he didn't start something now, people like Lena would continue being sacrificed to a machine disguised by the scent of grilled meat and hollow promises. The next morning, Adrian sat in a modest hotel room on Springfield's main boulevard, facing a map of the region covered in notes, photos, and documents collected overnight. On the table lay a burner phone beside a list of 15 Redstone hearth locations across the Southern District, all under the oversight of a name that had appeared in Lena's files the night before. Victor Lang, regional manager, once praised in an internal company profile for optimizing operational costs. Now Adrian knew that optimize might have just been a convenient euphemism for slashing, exploiting, and coercing. Over the next 72 hours, Adrian returned to the role of a wandering customer at 4 different branches, each time taking on a new identity. A traveling insurance agent, a freelance fitness coach, sometimes a food photographer, aunt. Though the disguises and tones changed, one thing stayed the same: the familiar tension he encountered in every location. Every restaurant had a locked tip box behind the counter. Actual work hours far exceeded the recorded ones, and the managers all carried the same demeanor as Raymond. Not in looks, but in attitude. Complete control with zero care for the diners. At a branch in Tulsa, a young woman washed glasses while mouthing words to herself, never taking her eyes off the ceiling camera. In St. Louis, Adrian noticed every staff member had signed a confidentiality agreement labeled, "Do not disclose operational practices externally," a document he had never authorized. The deeper he dug, the clearer it became. This wasn't a local issue. It was a system, a refined mechanism for human extraction, built on corporate jargon and disguised with team-building slogans. On the third night, Adrian received an encrypted message from his longtime assistant, Clara Doone, the only person who knew he was undercover. Her message was brief. "Call me on the secure line. You need to see this." He dialed in. Clara's voice came through. "I reviewed Springfield's financial logs. You were right. There are 2 sets of books." She explained that in addition to the official report submitted to headquarters, Victor Lang maintained a parallel payroll system through a company called Flexium, completely absent from the list of approved vendors. Flexium had been established just 3 weeks before winning the contract to manage regional payroll. The paperwork was flawless, but every listed representative was tied to shell corporations. Adrian froze. "How much?" he asked. "Rough estimate," Clara replied. "Close to $6 million siphoned from tips, wages, bonuses, and stipends, laundered through Flexium and funneled overseas." Victor just bought a home in Aspen, and his wife was recently seen on social media flaunting jewelry that costs more than the entire quarterly bonus pool for the district. Adrian said nothing for a few moments. His mind was spinning, not because of the money, but because of the betrayal. "I always believed culture was Redstone's core product," he said slowly. "Turns out, it was the first thing to be sold." And within him, a silent fury began to build. Not just at what Victor had done, but at the fact that he hadn't seen it sooner. After the late night call with Clara, Adrian knew he could no longer act alone. A decisive strike would require insider information, not just from management, but from those quietly holding up every shift. Among them, he needed someone willing to become the first spark. The next morning, Adrian returned to the Springfield branch right during peak hours. He requested the same old table, tucked in the far corner, and no one but Lena to serve him. She approached with a weary smile and the usual greeting, but her eyes had changed. No longer curious, but cautious. As she poured water, he leaned in and lowered his voice. "I've been thinking about what you said the other night, about the trap." Lena froze for a moment, then continued the motion as if nothing had happened. "I shouldn't have said that," she whispered, eyes scanning the room. Adrian nodded slightly, then tilted his head and said quickly, "I'm not a guest. I'm the founder. I'm here to fix what's been stolen, and I can't do it alone." Lena was stunned, but didn't react dramatically. She just stared at him. "If I help you," she said, "who's going to protect me when I lose everything?" Adrian pulled a sealed envelope and a flip phone from his jacket pocket. "Inside is a list of employees at other locations, people who are also beginning to suspect. This phone only connects to me and them. No data, no tracking, no history." Lena didn't take it immediately. She looked at it like it might explode, then sighed. "They're checking lockers now and going through phones. Last week, Jesse at the bar got fired just for snapping a photo of the timesheet." Adrian nodded. "I know, but if you stay silent, you're still gambling, just without any chance of winning." The next 3 days became a quiet game of strategy. Lena not only agreed to help, she became the underground bridge. She reached out to a cook named Marco, who had been promised a promotion twice and forgotten both times, a young receptionist drowning in student debt, a dishwasher who lost pay over smoke breaks he never took because he never smoked. At the St. Louis location, a veteran bartender submitted a tip log that had been altered. In Tulsa, an assistant manager secretly shared a photo of a butchered schedule after refusing to cover an emergency shift. In Wichita, a line cook discovered a whole box of bonus policy documents, never distributed, only shredded. Clara, working behind the scenes, began organizing the incoming data: photos, shift records, clock, in sheets, encrypted testimonies, all reference to reveal repeating patterns regardless of city. Adrian no longer traveled as often. Instead, he pulled strings from a distance, requesting the delay of bonus disbursements, proposing an audit of the Flexium contract, and launching an anonymous survey across the district. Victor had no idea who was doing it or where it was coming from, but he had begun to feel watched. And then Victor Lang showed up. In person, without warning. That afternoon, the atmosphere at the Springfield branch felt frozen in place. The sky was overcast, and a light drizzle made every movement inside the restaurant feel unusually tense. Lena sensed something was wrong the moment she stepped into the staff room. Everyone's eyes were fixed on the same spot, the locker corner, where a small suitcase and a light gray suit jacket hung neatly. Victor Lang had arrived. No notice, no explanation, no formal reason, and he wasn't alone. The 2 men who accompanied Victor wore no company uniform, but their eyes and their gait made it clear. They were not internal staff. One began inspecting the cameras, the other took notes constantly on a tablet. "Surprise quality audit," Victor announced, hands in pockets, gaze cold as ice. Within 20 minutes, cameras were installed in the break room. No, phone signs were taped up near the hand-washing station, and lockers were being randomly opened. One cook was summoned to the office for chatting during shift. A front desk worker was questioned for using her phone, even though it was just to check the time. Everyone was wound tight as a wire. Lena knew something worse was coming when she was called into the office while delivering water to a guest. Raymond stood outside the door, arms crossed, nodding silently. She followed him, heart pounding. The office smelled strongly of air freshener, but it couldn't mask the chill in the room. Victor sat behind the desk, suit perfectly pressed, hand resting on a thick file. "Lena Hart," he began, his voice so even it sent chills. 5 years with the company, 2 transfers, never late. You're the model employee, aren't you? Lena said nothing. He pushed the file toward her. "I have evidence that you access the payroll system outside of your shift hours at least 6 times in the past 2 weeks. You took screenshots, downloads, all logged." She opened her mouth, but he raised a hand. "Don't say it was by accident. We're also investigating a leak of internal data. Someone is sharing files externally. If you're involved, that's a serious breach. grounds for immediate termination and contract damages. On the desk sat a termination letter, unsigned but ready. All it needed was a confession, or one wrong move. Before Lena could speak, a knock interrupted. The receptionist peeked in, flustered. "Sorry, but there's a group from headquarters. They're calling for an all-staff meeting." Victor shot up. "That's not on the schedule," he snapped. "They said it's a directive from the executive board." Lena remained seated, but her hand trembled inside her apron pocket where the flip phone rested. It had just vibrated once, a message from the private line. The screen read, "Go out, sit front row, trust me." Lena stepped out of the manager's office with heels that seemed to press into every tile, each step syncing with the frantic rhythm of her heart. She had no idea what was unfolding outside, but that message, "Front row, trust me," could have only come from Adrian. She entered the main dining area, now rearranged like a makeshift auditorium, tables pushed to the sides, rows of plastic chairs aligned before a large projection screen. Employees filled the seats, murmuring with confusion. No one knew exactly what was happening, but everyone sensed that something was about to change. 3 people stood at the front. A woman with dark hair and glasses. Lena recognized her as Sophia Tran, an internal audit officer she had only seen in company. Wide emails. Beside her was Clara Dune, special assistant to the executive board, and a man standing with his back to the room. Victor Lang entered from the side, adjusting his tie, wearing a strained smile under a clearly annoyed expression. "Good evening," he began, his voice crisp. "I'm Victor Lang, regional manager. I'm here on behalf of the executive team." The man turned around. No more baseball cap, no more faded flannel shirt. Adrian Cole, in a white dress shirt, deep navy blazer, standing tall like he had never left this place. The room froze. Someone dropped a water glass, the crash echoing like a gunshot. "Good evening," Adrian said, eyes locked on Victor, his voice calm but strong enough to silence the room. "This is what we call a surprise inspection, but in truth, it is a cleansing, a truth long overdue." Sophia and Clara turned on the projector. The screen filled with altered payroll records, photos of manipulated tip sheets, a map connecting flagged restaurant branches. A bold red figure appeared, $6.2 million embezzled. Adrian stepped forward, scanning the faces in the room. "1 month ago, an employee told me this place was a trap, and she was right. Your tips were taken, your hours slashed, your rights ignored. But worst of all, your belief was stolen. The belief that if you worked hard enough, things would get better. I am sorry I let that happen under my name." Victor jolted upright, ready to walk out, but 2 security guards in black suits were already standing at the exit. "Victor Lang," Adrian said coldly, "you are under investigation for financial fraud and employee exploitation, and this is not a misunderstanding." Legal charges had been filed, Flexium's accounts frozen. Sophia added, 3 other branch managers have confessed. Your list of victims grows by the day." Victor tried to speak, but no one was listening anymore. Lena sat in the front row, hands icy, eyes brimming with tears. She never imagined the man who once sat down to a simple grilled chicken could be the founder of an entire empire. Adrian turned toward her, speaking slowly but with unwavering conviction. The first person brave enough to speak out in the dark deserves to step into the light. He extended his hand to her. "As of today, Lena Hart will lead our new Employee Protection Division, reporting directly to me." The room was silent. Then a few claps broke the tension. Hesitant at first, then rising, until the applause filled the room like a wave crashing through silence. And for the first time in years, Lena did not bow her head as she left the restaurant. She walked forward, her hand clasped in the one that had listened, and vowed never again to let the voices of workers be buried in silence. 6 months later, no one would recognize the Redstone Hearth branch in Springfield as the place once infamously called The Trap. The lights were still warm and golden, the steak still grilled to perfection over oak wood flames, but the atmosphere had completely transformed. The once distorted rhythm had given way to something that now closely resembled trust. During the lunch break, Lena Hart, no longer wearing an apron but holding a tablet in her hand, walked through the dining room with the calm stride of someone who knew exactly what she was doing. She paused beside a young server struggling with a tray of drinks, gently placed a hand on her shoulder and said, "It's okay. You did the right thing. Just take your time." The girl nodded and smiled, a real smile. In the past, someone like her would have been scolded for being unprofessional or disrupting service flow. But now, they were trained, heard, and protected. And much of that was thanks to Lena, who not only accepted the risk, but stood firm when the storm came crashing. Following Victor Lang's arrest, Redstone launched a company-wide audit. 11 managers were dismissed, 3 former executives prosecuted, and the entire timekeeping and tip distribution system was moved to an open platform, visible directly in the employee app. Within 2 months, the turnover rate dropped by 70%. Service improved, revenue steadily rose. But most importantly, the people working here wanted to stay. As for Adrian, he never returned to the executive boardroom. Instead, he walked through each location, bussing tables in Tulsa, cooking in Kansas, or simply listening during open forums with no managers allowed. On a light rainy evening, he and Lena sat together at the same old corner table, the one where those fateful words had once been spoken. "This place is a trap." Now, Lena looked out at the peaceful dining room, then turned to him and said, "I remember the first time I sat here. I felt trapped, not by the job, but by the illusion that I couldn't do anything else." Adrian nodded slowly. "And now?" she asked. "Now you're the one holding the key," he replied. He opened his briefcase and handed her a stack of documents. On the cover was the logo of the Redstone Foundation, a new organization Adrian had launched to promote fairness and transparency in the food service industry. And the first person he wanted to nominate as executive director was Lena. She sat in silence for a long while. "You think I'm capable?" she asked. "No," Adrian said. "I know you are. Because you've been hurt, you don't take others' pain lightly. You're the kind of leader this system needs." That evening, at a small staff celebration with family and friends, there were no grand speeches or flashy banners, only people who truly belonged there. A little boy knocked over a glass of water as he ran by, but instead of being scolded, a manager bent down to help clean it up, then handed him a piece of cake. From a distance, Lena watched, her eyes glistening but not tearing. She turned to Adrian, who had his daughter on his shoulders, and said, "We did it." He nodded. "And it's only just the beginning." At the end of the night, after everyone had gone home, Adrian returned to the corner table, pulled out a napkin and a pen, and wrote down the same 7 words that had once changed everything. This place used to be a trap, and right beneath it, he added, "Now it's home." A system does not collapse because of a lack of revenue, but because it loses the trust of the silent individuals who keep it running every single day. Adrian's story is not just about an overthrow, but a reminder that sometimes, to rebuild an organization, we must start by listening to the faintest voices. If you believe that change begins with truth, make sure to like and subscribe so you don't miss powerful stories of exposure and healing like this one. And don't forget to leave a comment with the phrase, "No more traps." Because perhaps a kinder workplace begins by calling wrong things by their true name.